Hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar on SharePoint training for NERC compliance. This is session 1, January 19th, 2016. We'll also have two other sessions, one on February 16th and one on March 15th. There'll be an opportunity to sign up for those, some website to go to sign up for those at the end of this webinar. Right now, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Scott Restivo with Crow Canyon Systems. I'll be joined today by Mary Jo Cooper of Cooper Compliance. Cooper Compliance and Crow Canyon Systems are both Northern California companies. Cooper Compliance is out in the Sacramento area. Crow Canyon Systems is in the San Francisco Bay Area. Cooper Compliance has developed Global Audit Ready, a tool to help you manage your NERC compliance programs with built-in controls. They also, the company, Cooper Compliance, also provides NERC consultants. They have a consultant practice in compliance for outsourced compliance, management services, mock audits, training, audit preparation, control development, and that kind of thing. Crow Canyon's focus has been on SharePoint and Office 365 applications. We have developed a number of applications on top of those platforms for help desk, asset management, security access requests. Also, there's ones customer service, purchasing, facilities management, and several others. If you're interested in any of these programs, then we'd be glad to talk to you more about those afterwards. In this webinar itself, we're going to focus on using SharePoint to manage compliance, NERC compliance, and how some of the best practices for doing that. We will go with the first section will be best practices for storing compliance documents in SharePoint, using metadata, handling the three types of evidence, providing controls. And the second section will be about using Office Mix, a PowerPoint add-in to create interactive training programs as you might need for compliance purposes. Then we'll have some questions and answers and hopefully be able to address your questions during the webinar, but we'll also be glad to answer any questions after the webinar and during, by email or phone or whatever. Now I'd like to introduce Mary Jo Cooper. She is the head of Cooper Compliance. She's been an electrical engineer for 20 or 30 years and has been very, very active in the Northern California and, in fact, most of California electrical industry compliance world, and she's well known, expert in that world. And she's going to present some of the information she has learned about in the years of using SharePoint to provide NERC compliance and through documentation, evidence, and other tools here. So, like I said, this will be the first session on it. There'll be two others, February and March. So I hope this proves very useful and active and useful and productive for your time here. And we will now get started. Well, here's Mary. Okay, Mary.
Sure. Okay, thanks, Scott. Just to begin, because we do have a few people that are kind of new to SharePoint, just wanted to go over some basics of SharePoint. Is much like a web page. It can be made up of multiple sites that can be navigated by using either a top or side ribbon. So here we're showing some different sites that we have. In the side ribbon, we're showing some document libraries and lists. Libraries are used to store individual documents and metadata describing the document. So it's going to provide the attributes of that document. A list is a collection of metadata, somewhat like an Excel spreadsheet. From each site, you will see Browse, File, and Library up here on the top. And that helps you get around. And you will not see the Browse, File, or Library until you're in a library or list item and have clicked on one of the list or library items. From Browse has the information to move throughout the site from each list and library. Files is used to perform an action on an individual item, such as adding new documents to a library list or modifying metadata or editing a specific document. The libraries tab right here, or if you were on a list, it would show lists, are used to perform an action on an entire library or list. For example, I can export a list or library to an Excel or Access where I can build reports with rich graphs, build queries, or from Access, enter information directly into SharePoint. I can also open the library using Explorer, Internet Explorer. So let's switch over to our demo site, and I'll show you how this looks. Okay, so from here, you can see here we have as you saw on the slide, here's our different sites and our lists and libraries. If I wanted to see the navigation screen, I would select something like Documents. And then now you see Browse, File, and Library. From Files, I can add new documents, upload documents. From Library, this is where I can even open with Explorer, export to Excel. And as mentioned earlier, you can interconnect your list or library directly with Microsoft Access and be able to perform create rich graphics and so forth. So that's just the basics to navigating SharePoint. There's plenty of SharePoint resources online. We don't want to deliver or dive too deeply into this because we would like to focus on the compliance aspect of using SharePoint. One of the things that we like to do here at Cooper Compliance is we have a commitment to only loading documents into SharePoint one time. This is going to help prevent a lot of errors that you might potentially have in presenting your compliance documents during an audit. So some of the reasons why is, and then we always want to go into an electronic format so that we're not losing things like paper logs. We don't want to, if you're storing documents in multiple locations in SharePoint, that can also cause problems. Next slide. So what I wanted to show you is this is an example of the bad use of SharePoint. If this is your company, you're probably not alone. I've seen this in many companies. This is where a company has come in and they just set up these different files and they just throw the data into each of the buckets, somewhat organized but not. You might experience some of these problems like sometimes I find different versions of the same document in different folders. I forgot to put the documents in the right folders. I don't have time to store the document because it takes research to recall where to put the document. Or maybe you're saying, I'm really good at this, and I use another document to identify where I've stored that document. At Cooper Compliance, our goal, again, is to build in as much efficiency as possible so that we can handle more clients and keep our rates low. Similarly, I'm sure you have limited budgets and limited resources. Today I'm going to show you a possible way to improve your efficiencies. So what we've done at Cooper, again, we store documents only one time. You'll not find the same document stored twice in our systems. To do this, we have identified that there are 3 types of evidence that we need to maintain to demonstrate compliance to NERC standards. That is documents that change, a new version is created, so each time it changes, you've created a new version. There's the second type is static documents, where each document is needed to demonstrate full compliance. These are going to be things like letters, notifications, emails, or periodic submittals. And then the third type are incident logs, which could be another SharePoint list or library. Metadata defines the attributes of your document or list item. For example, when you load a document into SharePoint Library that is going to be used to define the document, you will want to have the fields to define the title, date, and version, owners, authors, status, and other fields that help you filter out or search for documents or to create various views. For example, I might want to see all the documents from the same author or all documents used for a certain department. Attributes can also be used to capture controls such as reviews or approvals. So of the 3 types of documents, I'm going to discuss version-controlled documents in detail today. As you recall, version-controlled documents are procedures, policies, agreements, could be station diagrams, for example. These are all documents that when modified, a new version exists and the old version retires. The tips I'm going to provide here are the same no matter what version of SharePoint you're using. So the first key to using version control is naming your document appropriately. Do not put version or dates in the title, just use the name of the document. And the reason why is when you load up a document, for example, Protection System Maintenance version 3.2, and if I load up version, say, 4 and put that title on it, SharePoint sees it as a new item. And what we want to do is use version control in our document library. So instead, I'm going to put Protection System Maintenance Program. I'm going to use metadata to define the date and version of the document. But by using this method, you can stack the version-controlled document so that only the current version is viewed. This will mitigate the chance of two different people using different versions of the same document. Prior versions can be viewed using the version history feature. Use a document type field to define the type of document, such as agreement, procedure, policy, station diagram. This will allow you to view groupings to create a folder-like structure. Note, I said a folder-like structure. We do not use folders under normal circumstances in SharePoint. Other attributes you may like to collect is departments, users, etc. I'm going to switch over to the demo site now to show you how this works. So here I'm going to go into our evidence library, and you'll notice that we have a folder-like view. In this case, what we've filtered, or what we've grouped by, is we've grouped by the process. So every document that's associated with a certain process has been grouped. Here I have cybersecurity awareness quarterly postings, and here are all my postings. So, and I've used metadata here. In our evidence, we're putting a document name. Now let me go over to our documents library where we're using versioning, and you'll see something similar where we've grouped by agreements, procedures, and directories, and so forth. So what I've done is I've went into my library and set up different views. So I'm going to go ahead and modify this view, but you can also create views from this location. So I'm going to modify the view and show you how we've set this up for grouping. So here's my attributes or the metadata that I want to show, and then I'm now, I can sort by the name, and I can filter data out if I need it, but I use the group by feature, and I'm grouping by document type in this case. You can group by subject matter expert and others as well. So to turn on version control, from the top ribbon, you're going to select the library, then you're going to select the library settings, and then select version settings. Note that the SharePoint automatically assigns version numbers. However, I find it very difficult to align the actual version to the automated SharePoint version. This is why I recommend creating a version and date meta field. From the version control settings, you can require content approval for submitting items. You can create a version each time you edit a file in the document library by selecting Create, Major, or Minor, or create versions only when a new version is checked in. You can specify the number of versions you want to maintain. I generally don't select that because I've never run into a problem where I've run out of space on my system, so I tend to like to keep each version. You can also identify when certain people should be able to view the document in the library. For example, when you modify a version of a procedure, you may wish only to allow the people who have edit rights to be able to see the edit prior to the final version being accepted and approved. For procedures, I like to maintain a separate document library where I maintain the Word version of documents for editing and create a PDF of the document for consumption once approved. The PDF version goes into the document library. Note that the major version is only created when a document is checked in and out. So in order to enforce control of the versioning, you may want to see the library, set the library so that the documents can only or cannot be edited or replaced prior to checking out. Now let's see what this looks like. So we're going to switch back over to my SharePoint library where we have our documents. So from the Documents library, I'm going to select Documents here on the left and go to Library, Library Settings up here. and then I'm going to select version settings. Okay, here require content approval. I'm not going to require that. I'm going to create a version only when on major versions. And I'm going to require the document to be checked out before it can be edited. Okay, so that's how I've set that up. I'm going to show you what, once I've set that up, we'll go and look at a document where we're using this versioning. So here, BA Interconnection Agreement. So I can click on the three little dots here and the three dots here. Now, if you're using SharePoint 2010, it has a similar feature right to the right. And then also, you know, in order to get to the, so it looks very similar on 2010 or 2013. So now I'm going to select version history. And here I can see my version 1 and my version 2, and here I'm using the metadata to identify which version I have. If I wanted to see the old versions, I can simply just click on the link here and I can pull up the old versions. So now if I wanted to, now that we've got this set up right, I'm going to go ahead and load up version 3 of my BA Interconnection Agreement. So I'm going to just select New, and go to my desktop. Oops. Upload. I'm going to select Upload, and then I'm going to go to my browse to my desktop where I have the new version of my BA Interconnection Agreement right here, the PDF version. And now this is where I'm going to put in my metadata. So we're going to change the date here to 1/19. And we're going to call this version 3. And now I can check it in. And then we'll go and look at the version history again. And now we've got version 1, 2, and 3. So pretty simple. And let's go on to the next slide.
Well, Mary, there was a question that came up that was, if you added a metadata of PDF or doc, you could actually do a view where you showed only the docs and only the PDFs. Isn't that correct? So if you had a metadata, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. And you can set that up on your view or any type of metadata that you want to add.
Well, that's exactly it. The metadata could be any kind of field, a property on that document. It could be type of document, department. I mean, there's many, you know, who's the owner. I mean, there's many fields you could put on properties of the document, and you can use those in views and sorting and filtering and all kinds of things on each document. So that's what you're saying. You know, that I hope that answers the question. But that was, you know, a good question about using the metadata to control the view of the document library or list or whatever. Okay. All right. We'll go on to the next slide then.
Yeah. And in fact, okay, so we're back. I was going to say, you know, we set this up also so that I can view only the policies or procedures or only station diagrams. So you can use the filtering function to filter out those other types of data. So the next type of evidence that I want to talk about is the static evidence. So we have the 3 types. Again, we just covered the types of documents that use version control. This is evidence that is more static, meaning that the incident each record represents an actual document that you might need to pull up for an audit. So now, to do this, I'm going to do things a little bit different. If I'm in this case, I'm going to put the date on my name. So as an example, if I had a document where I'm doing my WEC vegetation quarterly submittal, I might call it WEC vegetation quarterly submittal, but I'm going to put the date at the end of each document. But I will also use the metadata in order to do the grouping and to view documents in the different ways. And the reason why we do this, again, we're trying to focus on being able to load documents into SharePoint one time. So at Cooper Compliance, we use a process-oriented approach to compliance. What this means is you first have to understand the requirement. So the requirements are developed pretty generically, and the reason why is because people in Canada, all across East Coast, West Coast, Texas, Mexico, all have to comply with these requirements. The process is basically, what do you do in your organization? What are the activities? What are the procedures, the policies, the communications? How do you comply with the standards? So we want to document each of those processes or controls out that show how you individually as a company comply with those requirements. Now, each document is assigned a process. So the process is actually a metadata on our file. So I showed you earlier the evidence folder where we had it grouped by process. So I can see all the documents associated with the process. Then what we're going to do is associate that process with the requirement. So we use a SharePoint list to document the process associated with the requirement. We use metadata to look up on the evidence to identify which process is associated with that evidence. So we can go flip over back to the evidence folder, and I'll show you that again.
So you're basically saying there's version control documents that you want to keep the title and keep the versioning going, like by not making the title have the date or specificality like that, but keep that in the versioning. But with evidence, you do it a little differently because there's static documents that don't change. Is that right?
That's correct. So here you can see what we're doing for our procedures. In our documents that have version control, you notice that the name is not there. The date or the date in the revision is shown over here, and the type of document is shown there. On the evidence, though, on the other hand, a lot of cases we're going to put, for example, here in the Cyber Awareness newsletter, I have the date for each newsletter. And that way, each time it gets loaded, it's seen by SharePoint as a different document. I can also then use my process and associate the process. I can also identify what type of evidence, if it should be included as self-certifiable, auditable. I can put my information classification if it's public or private, and put your information banners here. So all of that is an example of how you use metadata. So let's go back to the next slide. The final way of storing evidence is through the use of logs. SharePoint lists are a great method for logging activity that occurs randomly or often. We've designed many types of SharePoint lists that build in controls to ensure timeliness, accuracy, and completeness, as well as Crow Canyon. So SharePoint lists established with advanced controls and workflows, when set up correctly, can provide superior business tool to not only maintain evidence, but to place controls so that all activities required are complete. Now, for example, we've created a operator log, or it even is really kind of an electronic procedure where each step, as the operator is performing each step, they mark it off. Now I've collected that information in SharePoint, so I can provide evidence when I received a reliability directive what we did. Did we follow all the steps? We have maintenance logs for collecting maintenance records. Scott, you have a couple of lists and libraries.
Oh, yeah. Well, Crow Canyon, we've done this much work with logging, for instance, ticketing from requests for help desk issues or purchases or marketing, security access requests. So adapting that for the NERC compliance is quite easy. It's just a matter of keeping track of each incident, each event, each thing that needs to be done, you might say, and logging it in a way that makes sense. Now, you can use SharePoint lists for that. It's basically a glorified task, you might say, and then organize it in such a ways. Our program is, it's a kind of a whole nother level with automatic assignment and reporting and many other sophisticated things that are required in kind of help desk functionality. So the logging can either be very simple, like kind of task, or it can be more complex if you're going to assign it and escalate it and have service level agreements and things like that that maintain the necessity of that log, that ticket being seen through to completion. Now, a log could be simply like in a book where you just, write in each line, I did this today, I did that today, I did that today. That's kind of very simple, and that could be pretty much done in a SharePoint list with a task that has a few added columns, specific columns you add to it, kind of dress it up a little. I call it glorified task sort of, and just have a list, a control log list, a control room log list, and then put in what room it is and have a drop list, things like that, dress it up a little. If you do want more advanced kind of task maintenance, ticketing kind of system, then there are more sophisticated ways to do it, and we've developed web parts and things for that. But just out of the box, SharePoint can do that kind of logging instead of writing it down like I guess the old days used to write it on a piece of paper in a big book or something. But you can do it electronically and then have a nice group of lists inside of SharePoint that record that this person did that work on that day, and this is some notes about it, and it keeps a very good way of tracking it, kind of electronic log. And the most important thing is you can search it. This is the important thing to be electronic. You can search it, you can find it, you can pull it up when you need it, and group and sort it using data, just like Mary was talking about earlier, metadata to group and filter these.
Right. And you can also, as Scott mentioned, you can use workflows to build in these additional controls, and controls are very important to make sure that we're complying with standards. So, the point is you don't have to build the logs yourself. You can build them yourself. But you can also purchase advanced logs as an add-on to SharePoint. SharePoint allows you to purchase all types of different add-ons.
Right.
Okay,
so we've kind of gone through the version control documents, the static evidence, and incident logs, and kind of summarize all that. And Mary may want to go through that and kind of summarize things, and we can get to some questions if there are any.
Yeah. So let's switch back over to the demo site and let's show them the 3 different types of evidence kind of as a summary. So here I'm showing the a report for SIP version 4 or SIP 4 version 5.1, and here we've got some different process narratives that describe how we comply with the standards, and I've grouped these into the 3 different types of evidence that we are talking about. First of all, our cybersecurity asset training, which is in our documents library, and I can use a version control to pull up old versions when needed. And then we have each of our quarterly newsletters that are put in. This is the evidence where we're putting the date on each of them. And I also have a training log where I can, this is just a demo site, but any of these I could click over and show, here's, my logging system. Of course, now we can have different groupings depending on what those lists or libraries are. So this is just an example of the 3 different types of documents. Again, all documents are stored one time. I can associate this document or the critical cyber asset training procedure with many different requirements, but I'm still only loading it into the system one time. So let's go back to the PowerPoint slide, and we'll just summarize this up and get ready for our Office Mix demo. The first step to really being able to manage your compliance program in only storing the documents one time is to first understand the regulation. Identify the documents or you're going to identify and document the process and controls. So, how do you, as an individual or as an individual organization, comply with the standards? Each piece of document, each type of document you should describe individually, because the auditors want to know, why did I put this document into my audit file? Here's a procedure. I like to use the 5 W's, who did what, when, where, and why. You're going to describe those and then describe that, so you're describing the document, why are you using it to demonstrate compliance. And then the documents that are the individuals, like for example, the cyber awareness newsletter was an example we had. We again document that, each quarter we provide the cybersecurity newsletter. You're going to say that the cybersecurity manager provided the cybersecurity newsletter to individuals who have been authorized access to your high-risk cyber systems, as an example. So each of those is identifying that process. Once you identify the process, you know what type of evidence it's going to get loaded against. That way you're only loading your evidence one time. You're going to know what type of evidence you're going to prove the process or control. You're going to use version documents, and again, on version documents, the key is use only the title of the document without the version and date. And then you're going to use the static documents, and then incident logs are the third type. So we build a SharePoint list to create the association of the requirement and process, and then I can export it out to Excel or Access and create different forms or reports that you might want to use in your compliance program. For example, we've documented the controls that we have. We can now export all of our controls out and have that ready to present for our internal control evaluation. So using the process-oriented approach, each piece of evidence identifies which process it is associated with. Again, so we're loading the evidence to the process, and that allows us to only load the document one time. It's going to prevent all kinds of errors like having different, the same version or different versions of the same document used to demonstrate compliance to different items, or having a document associated with one requirement and not having all versions of it in, or sets, different examples of it. You're going to have different documents for, what I want to say is each requirement, you might want to use the same evidence, but then you end up using different evidence for each one, and you really don't want to do that because it's going to cause confusion for the auditor. So that's, in summary, right now what we're going to do is open the lines for questions. Are there any questions, Scott?
Yeah, there's a couple questions there. One is about having one document. You don't have a PDF and doc of the same thing. You're only supposed to have one, either a doc or a PDF, so you don't get two versions of the same piece of evidence or the same version control document. You want just one, either a PDF or a doc.
Yeah, now the reason why I like to use PDF documents is because that really kind of represents the final. It's not changed. The auditors prefer to have PDFs. For example, if you have an email, a lot of times what you want to do is create a PDF of the email when you load it in. The auditors don't always have the same version of Outlook or whatever your mail is. So when they open it up, they may not have the same version of Word. And so the best thing to do is PDF your document. I do, again, for procedures, policies, the types of things that are going to use version control, I like to use two different libraries, or I'll use metadata in some cases to say that it's a draft document so that we only have the final document presented at all times to the auditors.
That's good. One question is about electronic signing. That's definitely possible in SharePoint with DocuSign or other type things that can integrate with SharePoint. Very, very possible to have a electronic signature mechanism built in. There's a question about workflow, but I think that's probably a longer discussion. We might do that after the webinar. That's a good question.
Actually, that's for workflows. We have, if you sign up for one of our future sessions, we're going to be covering how to develop workflows.
Oh, in the February or March webinars? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, good, good. And then there's something, a question about triggering some alert or some reminder that something needs to be done on that version. Like I guess you're doing a document and then there might be something that at some point in time needs to be done about it. I know the logs can do that with the task, that you can set up a task to be completed. So maybe it would be a task associated with the document so that you know that, in February 1st I have to do something with this document.
Yeah, and in fact, you can set up a workflow, and this is another topic that we're going to be covering in a future webinar. You can set up a workflow to monitor when things are due, or our Global Audit Ready system does that for you, where you would just put it in the next test date and if it's, or the next due date. So for example, if it's a document that needs to be revised once every year, then it would automatically remind you when it's due and mark off once the document's completed. You can use that by setting up a task in the task list or just creating a simple workflow. And we're going to cover that again in a future session.
Great. Well, you can see there's a lot of interest and questions about using SharePoint for this kind of compliance document storage, and obviously it's a very good tool for doing that. And we'll get to some more questions. And like I said earlier, you can always talk to Mary or me directly, or we'll try and answer after the webinar, but also at the end of the webinar, we'll have some questions, but even after, we're always available. We'll have put up our email addresses and phone numbers and all that. And we're interested in how we can help you out with this. We will now move into the Office Mix portion of our webinar. Mary will show you how to use Office Mix, a PowerPoint add-in, for NERC compliance and training purposes.
Okay, so NERC Compliance Monitoring and Enforcement Plan identifies procedures supplemented with training as a preventative control. So not, having a procedure by itself does not act as a control. However, if you provide training and can provide evidence that you provided training along with that procedure, then it counts as a preventative control. Office Mix provides a simple way to prepare training materials and collect feedback that demonstrates that the training was completed. Amongst many features of Mix, you can insert interactive questions, monitor the time spent on each slide, and obtain test score results. So Cooper Compliance also uses Mix to prepare mandatory training to demonstrate compliance. One of our popular training programs using Mix is our protection system training. We have an overview awareness that provides general information on the protection system, and when we build in custom training, and then we'll build custom training for your facility specific to the composite protection system scheme in your area. So I'm going to use that protection system overview as part of our demo here in a little bit. Office Mix, again, it's a free add-on to your Office PowerPoint. So you just go in, and if you Google Office Mix, you can just download it. And then once it's downloaded and added in as an add-on, you'll see it there on the top. You'll have another tab called Mix. You can view who watched the training program and collect test scores and download them to Excel as well. So once you create your training materials, you can add voiceovers, videos, and other sounds such as music. You can, to make it interactive, you can add quizzes or collect survey information. To do this, we'll first need to download the quiz apps, which are also free from the App Store. To insert a new slide, select quiz. You're going to select quizzes, video apps, and then add the quiz type that you would like. So let's see what this looks like. Next slide. So here, what I've done here, I'm going to just give you a couple examples. This is a multiple choice quiz type. It can allow single choice, multiple choice, shuffle questions, allows retries, and you can limit the number of attempts to get the correct answer. I can also provide feedback when the correct answer is selected. So here, if you had selected, yes, I will sign up for Crow Canyon and Cooper Compliance product demos, you would get the answer that says, that is a very smart choice. Okay. The next slide, and this is a survey question where I can collect feedback. And then the next slide, I'm going to show this is just a simple true and false question. You notice that I can also add feedback here. If somebody selected true, you can tell them, or if they selected false, you can also tell them why. So this is, you would just select this area right here where it would say feedback. And then finally, the fourth type is a fill-in-the-blank question. The next slide. So Mix has a wizard built in to make it easy to publish your Mix. Once published, you will be able to provide the URL that you can use to share your training materials. Each user will all you have to do is have a Microsoft account. It doesn't have to be like a cloud account. It's just any Microsoft account. And you can share that. They sign in with their Microsoft account or Google account, and you can collect, for each person who signs in, they'll log their name, again, the quiz results, how much time they spent on each slide. So you can, and then next slide, you can view and download the Mix results to Excel, sign in to your Mix. To do that, you just sign into your Mix, you select My Mixes, and then view analytics and export to Excel. So I'm going to switch back over right now and show you how this all works. Okay, so here is our training slides for our protection system training. And each slide, if I were to show this, will have a voiceover as I go to each slide, and so I've built in, well, I guess I got my volume turned off right now, but it does have a voiceover. And then as I go to each slide, then I would get to the point where here I have a mixed question, and then they could select the correct answer, and it would demonstrate, or it would show if they answered it. So this is where I set it up. I just went in to add a new question. I would just go in here and insert a new slide. I usually just put in a blank slide, and then I can go into my mix, and then I would just add a quiz app from the store, and I can pick whatever type of response I want. Once I've added it, I can actually copy this from slide to slide as well, and then just go ahead and change the answers. So here you would put in or something like that. Now I would say that's a false answer, so I'm going to select over here, and that would be my correct answer. So if I wanted to do preview, you can preview the results, and if I select it right, it's going to give me the right answer. Or if I select here, so if this is the wrong answer, then I would hit submit, and it's going to say incorrect. Now if I put some feedback there, it would tell them why. You could say why it's the wrong answer and so forth. So that's just how you would set that PowerPoint mix question up. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this slide because we're not going to use it. But that's just a demonstration of how I've collected the correct information here. And then I just went into my mix, and then at that point I upload to mix. Okay, so once you hit the upload button, it steps you through, and then you can. It's going to prepare the Office mix, and then you'll be able to log in using one of either your Office account. And I'm not going to go through the whole process here, but I just wanted to show you that the wizard is pretty simple here. This one is going to prepare it to upload, but I'm going to switch right over here and pick up my other screen where I've already got that loaded. So once I've loaded it, I put in a title, a little description, and then you can assign permissions. So in this case, I pulled the bar here to limited. It can be private where only you can see it, limited. You can pull it over to unlisted, and then also you can make it available for public use where somebody can search it. But I'm going to pick limited because I want to have this secure. And then it will produce the URL. Now all I have to do is copy out this URL and provide it to whoever I want to be able to take that test. So this is under my mixes here. So I'm going to go over here to my mixes, and here's my training program. You can come in and take that training program. Now, if I want to, you can view different analytics on it, and see who performed the test or who took the training. Download the results. You can download the results of your analytics. This is where you download it. I'm sorry. So you can view it by slide, by visitors, and I can see how much time each person spent on it, and so forth. And then once I download it, I'm going to download it into an Excel spreadsheet. And then you can, if you wanted, you could import that back into SharePoint, into a SharePoint list, and be able to see who took the test, how many people took it, and so forth. So to download, and it just has a lot of different information here on that particular mix. So let's see. I wanted to go back over here and watched mixes. I can see how many people watched it. I have one where it's in progress, apparently. So it's a very simple system to use, and I highly recommend that you use it because it's an easy way to track who took those training programs without having a separate training program within your system. But let's go back to, actually, let me just show you this. You can also, though, export it to publish it to video or export it to SCORM. And SCORM is kind of a standard that once people take this training program, you can actually import it into your, if you have a training program, you should be able to import it into your training program. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here.
Well, that's we're coming up on the 11 o'clock, here in Pacific time, and that's about an hour. So, that's we're kind of nearing the end of this, but we did. It seems like Mix by itself could be, pretty good webinar. We might want to include that in a future webinar. That there's so much there, so much of possibilities with it that this was just more like a tease of what's possible. So could be quite useful in NERC training, obviously, and other training actually, any kind of training. So it's kind of interesting to know more about. But right now, here, sign up for our upcoming webinars. We have, you go to maryscoopercompliance.com/blog. You'll see the registration, pages there. And here's what's going on February 16th, February 16th and March 15th. You'll see there's some pretty good topics we're going to cover there, again, specifically to help with your NERC compliance. And if any questions, we can stay on a bit and see if anybody has any other questions. Otherwise, you can email Mary and I directly or call the companies, and be glad to help out. We do have the tools, the Global Audit Ready, and Crow Canyon has the help desk. They'll put together a NERC compliance, kind of sophisticated NERC compliance, but hopefully this training showed you how you can even use basic out-of-the-box SharePoint and accomplish a lot of your NERC compliance goals for you. Mary, you got anything else you want to add in here?
No, just that, please contact either myself or Scott at Crow Canyon if you'd like to see a demo of our products, these which are also free, or they're not free, but they're add-ons to SharePoint that will actually help you jump boost your compliance program so that you're audit ready. You can add it in, you can add in those controls for your ICE program. So. Well,
yeah, and the bottom line is these are in use at certain locations already, and we gain this experience from actually implementing them and putting them into real, really matching them up to the NERC compliance needs of certain utilities. So these are tools in action in certain places already. So and SharePoint has proven to be quite a useful tool for this compliance requirements. So glad to talk to you about it more, but I think for now we can just thank you all for attending and have a good day, and hope to see you at future webinars or hear from you and help you out with these compliance. Thank you, Mary.
All right, thanks, Scott.
Okay.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, bye.